Hi everyone, I'm Michele Gusdorff from Bethel Congregation in Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm happy to be here with you today cooking again. And today we're going to be making a pumpkin bread with cranberries and chocolate chips. So let's talk a little bit about why we're going to be making a pumpkin bread with cranberry in it for this time of year. Fall is here, and this is harvest season, and we have all sorts of delicious new items. We have cranberries, we have pumpkins, we have apples, and let's also talk a little bit about the connection to Thanksgiving, which is coming, and Sukkot, which is a Jewish holiday which is just passed. Many years ago, back in 1492, the Jews were expelled from Spain, and after going to a number of different countries, some of them settled in Holland because the Dutch were very tolerant of people with other religions. Fast forward to 1608, when the Pilgrims were told to leave England because of the intolerance of the religious leaders there. And they also settled in different countries, but many of them also settled with the Dutch people in Holland, and they became acquainted with the Jewish people that were there. They saw the Jews celebrating the holiday of Sukkot, and several years later, when they crossed the Atlantic, they ended up celebrating Thanksgiving. Now, let's talk a little bit about the ties between Sukkot and Thanksgiving. The Jewish people had to cross the Red Sea. The Pilgrims had to cross the Atlantic Ocean. The Jews wandered in the desert for 40 years, and the Pilgrims didn't wander for 40 years. They wandered in the New World for a while the Indians showed them how to grow plants, harvest plants, get used to the different climate that was there. And the Indians showed them a great deal of friendship. And when after the harvest season was over, after the fall harvest, the Pilgrims decided that they would host a Thanksgiving feast, just like the Jews were hosting a Thanksgiving feast that was called Sukkot. It was the holiday of the first harvest in the fall, and the Pilgrims were celebrating their first harvest, and they certainly were aware of the similarities between the two holidays. So we have the crossing of the sea, crossing of the ocean. We have the fall holiday. During Sukkot, it is very common and welcoming to invite guests to your Sukkot to celebrate a meal with you. And the Pilgrims did the same thing. They invited their new Indian friends to celebrate and break bread and enjoy the harvest season with them. So there are lots and lots of different connections. And even another one that I thought was a little bit interesting, the shape of the shofar, which is the ram's horn, is the same shape as the cornucopia. So that was something that I find very interesting, that is now a symbol of the fall harvest. So there are several connections between Thanksgiving and Sukkot. So let's get started with our delicious pumpkin bread. This is a quick loaf. It's going to be, it will be rising with the aid of baking soda and baking powder. There is no yeast involved in this, and it is a 1 bowl mix. And you're going to need any mixers for this at all. So let's get started. The recipe should be available to you with this YouTube. So let's start with what I like to call the wet ingredients. And you may not agree that they're all wet, but I'm calling them the wet ingredients because pumpkin is going to be one of them. So that's kind of like a half a solid, but it mixes so well, I'm calling it a wet ingredient. So the first thing I need to do is measure a half a cup of vegetable shortening. I am not using olive oil for this. Olive oil has a fruity, delicious flavor to it, but it's a little too strong for the pumpkin bread. So that's why I'm using a general all-purpose vegetable oil. And then I have a half a cup of vegetable oil, and I'm going to use a 1 cup of solid pumpkin. This is not pumpkin mix. You can buy that at the supermarket as well, that has other ingredients that are mixed into it. But we are going to be adding our own spices. So we are going to use 1 cup of solid pack, oops, nothing spilled, 1 cup of solid pack pumpkin. Now I did the vegetable shortening first, and then I put the pumpkin in. It should make the pumpkin slide out very easily. How about that? All right, neat little cooking trick. If you have to add oil, use it first, and then put in whatever ingredient is next, and it should slide right out. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to whisk I'm going to put the pumpkin over here, and I'm going to whisk together the oil and the pumpkin. I'm not using a spoon for this. I'm going to be using a whisk because I want to make sure that it's really, really well incorporated. All right. And the next thing I'm going to do is it calls for 1.5 cups of sugar, which I've already measured out, and I'm going to add that to the mixture. And again, still using my whisk because I really want it to incorporate well. There you go, and you can see it comes together very, very easily. All right, now I'm going to crack 2 eggs into a bowl. And what I'm going to do is add the eggs. Whoops, slipped in there. I'm going to add the eggs one at a time and make sure they're well mixed in. And the reason I'm adding the eggs into a bowl first before I add it into the mixing bowl is because in case I were to get a piece of shell into the mixture, into the bowl, I would want to be able to fish it out. Another little cooking tip is that if you do get a piece of shell in, use your eggshell to pull it out. Don't stick your finger in, don't stick a spoon in. It will just slide all over the place. Use an eggshell to get it out. All right, here's the second egg in there. And using the whisk, you can see that the egg and the pumpkin and the oil and the sugar have come together. And what a beautiful, beautiful color this is. All right, done with that. All right, let me move the things I'm done with. And the next ingredients I've already put into a measuring cup. Now, I want you to note that I've got the spices in here and the baking powder and the baking soda and the salt. They're laying right on top. So let me tell you what is in here, and I'll explain to you why they're laying right on top. I have 1.5 cups of flour. I have 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. Notice there's a theme, 1/2 and 1/2 and 1/2, and another 1/2 teaspoon each of cloves, ginger, nutmeg, and cinnamon. If you do not like or have a sensitivity towards any of those spices, just leave it out. Don't double up on anything else because it'll make it too strong. Just omit it. And also 1/2 teaspoon of salt is in there. Now what I'm going to do is, instead of dumping it in and then mixing it, I'm going to mix it through here first. Because if I were to dump this right into the mixing bowl, what might happen is that there might be a little pocket of ginger or a little pocket of nutmeg or cloves that wouldn't be mixed in carefully, and you wouldn't want to bite into a mouthful of that. So that's why they're all mixed together in here before I add it to the bowl. Now I'm going to add it. I'm just going to dump it all in. I told you this is a very, very easy recipe. All right. And we're just going to keep stirring and stirring until this is all mixed together, which will happen soon enough. And while I do that, I'm going to tell you about the next ingredients. This original recipe comes from a hospital in Philadelphia. And maybe 20 years ago, I got the recipe. They used to send out a little brochure maybe every 3 or 4 months telling people in the immediate neighborhood what things the hospital was doing with donations and funding and all sorts of things and new programs that they had. And they would always include a recipe at the end of their brochure. So one fall, this recipe came for pumpkin bread, and I tried it, and I decided, what can I do to make it better? What can I do to enhance it? And I came up with the idea of adding the chocolate chips and the cranberries to it. So we're going to do that next. And you see, while I was talking, it's all come together. And essentially, this is your pumpkin loaf. I said it was a very, very easy recipe. And you can see how easy it is. All right, now let me just scrape this off with the spatula. And we'll add the other ingredients. You don't want to add your cranberries or your chocolate chips along with the flour. What happens is they'll just get coated with the flour. They'll sink into the mixture, and you'll have a mess inside there. You really do have to add things at the end once the batter is all mixed together. So I'm going to add the chocolate chips, and I'm using dark chocolate. I happen to think that the dark chocolate stands up very, very well to the spices and to the mellowness of the pumpkin. If you prefer to use the semi-sweet chocolate chips, go right ahead and do it. But as I said, I'm using dark chocolate chunks. Now, the next thing I want to show you, all right, this is a little colander. I love this little colander. It is so practical. I have a big one that I use for pasta, but this I like to use when I'm straining or washing small quantities of things. Now I'm adding a half a cup of dried cranberries. Now let me go over to the sink and I'm going to pour it through the colander and then I'll be right back. All right, I'm pouring the cranberries through here. All right. And the reason why I had them sitting in hot water, and that's what they were soaking in, is that cranberries, raisins, apricots, cherries, all tend to get a little dried out as they sit in the bag. And you want them to be as plump as they possibly can be. And I'm wiping off the extra moisture right now because we don't need an additional moisture in the pumpkin loaf. Whoops, I'm losing a couple of them. I'm just gonna pick them right up and dump them right in. All right, where is my spatula? Let me get them in. This little colander you can buy in the supermarket, you can buy it at Target. I happen to have seen it in the local supermarket, and I think it was selling for something like $3.79. So for under $4, it really isn't a great addition to your cooking utensils and equipment. And I really do guarantee that you'll get a lot of use out of it. So there is our batter. It's got the chocolate chips and the cranberries, and you can really smell the pumpkin. Pumpkin is very mild, has a lovely flavor, and it can be either savory or it can be sweet, as it is in this particular recipe. All right, so what I'm gonna do now is I am going to add this to our baking pan. Now, I have already greased and floured the baking pan, and as you can see, the flour is inside. Take a look. I try to be very, very careful when I grease the pan to make sure I get the corners at the bottom, and then I go up the sides to make sure that I grease that so that when the flour goes in, I won't have any spots where the pumpkin loaf will stick to it. When you do take it out of the pan, if anything sticks, just go in with a knife, lift it out, and put it right back into the loaf, flatten it down, and in 15 minutes it will adhere. All right, so I am going to pour this into the pan, and then I'll show you what the next step is before it goes into the oven. All right, this is heavy. This is going to be a very heavy loaf, which is good. That is definitely not a bad thing. It's filled with all sorts of good flavors. And let me continue to use my spatula to get this out. And we are going to top this with turbinado sugar. The original recipe did not call for that. And I like to top my banana chocolate chip loaf with cinnamon sugar. This gets topped with turbinado sugar. It gives it an extra little crunch, an extra little bit of sweetness, and deliciousness, which is one of those terms I do like to use. All right, just a little bit more coming out. Turbinado sugar is made from light brown sugar, and in the process of making it, it crystallizes it and gives you nice hearty chunks of sugar, so that when you taste the bread, the loaf, you'll have a little crunch on top. Let me give this a little shake to even it out a little bit, and I'm going to wipe that off. And here is the turbinado sugar. All right, this is what the loaf looks like in the pan, almost ready to go into the oven. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 5 packages of turbinado sugar. Before you tell me that's a lot of sugar, you are not eating the whole pan at once. You are going to be eating it slice by slice, so that you're not going to be getting 5 packs of sugar all at once. And what I like to do is do this in sections, so I kind of keep track of where I have put the sugar. So I started at the end, probably have about a quarter of it done. Now I'm going to do the same thing here. Kind of go back, double back on this. So I have about a half of the loaf pan covered. Trying to shake it as evenly as I can. Trying to get into all the little corners. And I think I'll do one more pack. I don't think I need to use the fifth one. And with the fourth one, I'm going to just go back and make sure I cover all those little nooks and crannies. All right. And one more time, I'm going to give it a little shake. And now I'm going to walk it over and put it into the oven, which is heating at 350 degrees. We'll see you in 1 hour. Okay, so we're back now. The pumpkin loaf is in the oven. And now, as I promised, we're going to be making the next part of our recipe. It's a pumpkin cream cheese spread, or dip if you would like. So the ingredients for this are pretty much similar to what we did with the pumpkin loaf. Obviously, the first ingredient is going to be pumpkin. And I do not have oil in this like I did when I was making the loaf. So I'm just going to use a butter knife just to aid in getting it out. That should be pretty good. And the next ingredient that's going to go in is going to be cream cheese. Now, there are a couple of different kinds of cream cheese products that are out there in the supermarket. One of them is whipped cream cheese, which is what I'm using. And then there's the brick cream cheese. You all know that one that's in the aluminum foil wrapper. It's up to you to decide which one you want to use. I'm using the whip just because it combines easier. If you want to use the brick cream cheese, and that does have less ingredients than the whipped cream cheese spread has, be aware that you must leave it out of the refrigerator for about 3 hours before you use it in the recipe. Cold cream cheese will not combine. Let me tell you that one more time. Cold cream cheese, whether you're using it in this recipe or making a cheesecake or any other recipe that calls for cream cheese, will not combine, will not mix unless it's at room temperature and soft. Now, is there a shortcut? Sure, because I've done it myself where I've, forgotten to take it out of the refrigerator. So what I would recommend is if you are going to use the brick cream cheese and you have forgotten to take it out, put it on a microwave safe dish, cover your piece of cream cheese with wax paper, put it in the microwave for 5 seconds, flip that piece of cream cheese over and put it back in for another 5 seconds. And then take a butter knife and kind of poke at it and see if you can mush it around. That is a good technical cooking term. Mush it around, and if it's mushable, then it's ready to use. If not, put it in for another 5 seconds until you get the desired softness that your recipe will need. All right, so here we go. We have the cream cheese, we have the pumpkin, and now we need to have some brown sugar. I have a brand new bag of brown sugar over here, and I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of brown sugar. Brown sugar's got a nice mellow flavor to it, a different kind of a flavor than granulated sugar because it has molasses in it. So I am going to use a tablespoon, a generous tablespoon of brown sugar. It doesn't have to be level. You can see that my brand new bag of brown sugar has got some hard lumps in it. If you run into that kind of situation, what you can do is if you're having it poured right into a canister, you can put a slice of bread on top of the brown sugar in the canister, close it up, come back the next day, and your brown sugar will be soft and the bread will be hard as a rock. On the other hand, I'm not doing that. I'm just going to put my rubber band around it, and I'm going to work around those lumps if in fact they're still here. But that's just a little cooking tip that you may not know, that the moisture from the bread will go into the brown sugar and will make it soft again. So let's see what we're going to do now. We're going to add the same spices that we used in the pumpkin loaf: cinnamon, ginger, cloves, and nutmeg. Now, because this is not a huge quantity, we need to use a very, very small amount of our spices. So I am going to suggest that you use a scant amount of the spices. The smallest measurement that I have is 1/4 teaspoon. You don't want to put a 1/4 teaspoon in there. You just want a scant amount. So I'm going to use this much. It's not even half, so it's not even 1/8 of a teaspoon. So I'm going to be very judicious in making sure that I used just a small quantity. And if you notice, after I use it, I'm putting it over here. I don't want them to make the mistake, and I've done this before with, did I put that in or not? Because if you put it right down in front of you, I guarantee you're not going to necessarily remember. So just put them away. You've used them, they're done. And you know they're ready to get the lids put back on and put into the cabinet as soon as you finish. Vanilla. This is going to give a nice, warm flavor to our pumpkin cream cheese. And we're going to use a 1/2 teaspoon. Let me get my 1/2 teaspoon. And I would suggest that you use the real product, not imitation vanilla. I know that prices are going up and they are a little high, but pure vanilla always makes a very welcome addition rather than an artificial vanilla flavor. All right, so let's mix this up, and it will combine very, very easily because the cream cheese is soft, the pumpkin is soft, the vanilla gives it a little tiny bit of liquid that helps it mix better, and you've got those delicious spices in there. All right, let me keep mixing because I want everything to be well combined. And if you're using the brick cream cheese and it's soft, it will mix as easily as this. I promise you that it will. Now that came together very, very quickly and very, very easily. So there is our finished product. Now what you want to do is after you finish making this, you want to put it into a little dessert bowl and let it sit in the refrigerator. It will firm up a little bit. And I just want to show you, this is the finished product. Okay, it does firm up a little bit. This is delicious for dipping honey whole wheat pretzels into. You can use it on top of pancakes or waffles, put it on bagels, pita chips. Use your imagination. Oh, and how about the pumpkin loaf that we're making today? You certainly can put it on top of that. In fact, my husband's waiting for it to come out of the oven so that he can put it on top of that. Now, what are you going to do with the leftover pumpkin that's in the can? Well, here are some suggestions because I like to think outside the box. When you make pasta the next time and you have your marinara sauce, why not add a very liberal tablespoon or 2 of pumpkin? Trader Joe's has a product that they put out every year at this time, and it's either pumpkin or butternut squash that's in their marinara sauce. It's delicious, and I guarantee you that by putting the sauce into this, the pumpkin into your sauce, it'll be that extra little something that'll be, what is that? I'm not quite sure what it is, but it really makes it delicious. Continuing to think outside the box, if you're making mac and cheese, there's no reason why you can't add pumpkin to that. A little extra nutrition to it, and also a very delicious flavor. How about if you're having oatmeal in the morning? Add a spoon of pumpkin to it. And add a little bit of extra spice to it as well, just to give it the extra little something that it needs. So think outside the box and decide how you can use the extra pumpkin. And why not buy another can and just make another loaf of pumpkin loaf? I guarantee you that you will really enjoy it. All right, so let's take some time and wait for the pumpkin to come out of the oven, and then I'll come back here again and be with you and show you how it all looks when we have it all assembled. Okay, so we're back now, and you can see that the pumpkin cranberry chocolate chip loaf has cooled, and I've sliced it, and we're going to be having a cup of tea along with our cream cheese dip. And I'd like you to come on over and join me. I've got a nice loaf here for you to have with me, and I hope that you too will enjoy making this loaf. You saw how easy it was, how it came together so quickly, and you saw how easily the cream cheese spread also came together so easily. Think outside the box, just like I'm using some of the suggestions that I gave you of how to use that extra pumpkin. And I hope that you will enjoy sharing this recipe with your family and friends. Until next time, enjoy.